A lot of people were worried about mass famine when coronavirus hit, and now all of a sudden workers can't go out and they're very afraid to be farming. Did that actually happen? Are we seeing increased levels of starvation because of COVID?
I think you're seeing more of the indirect impacts of COVID affecting lives more than anything else. If I look at food systems in the United States, we know what happened in our livestock processing plants.
Yeah, the pig, yeah.
Or poultry. It was a people issue, right? And I think since then we've seen some changes come about, and they got back up. But people looked at that and they said, "See, the U.S. system is flawed. They've shut down. They can't produce poultry meat or pork or beef or things like that." But the reality is that supply chain, that person that was producing the young pigs, that the person that was producing the fattening of the hogs, the person that was then processing them later, that's a supply chain is very coordinated, but it was very resilient. It came back up and running as soon as they got past this people issue at the processing plant. And that same goes for poultry, same goes for the beef. I think a lot of our systems came back up and were successful. I think there's still some issues probably pending because of the amount of human resources it takes in a lot of our vegetables, for instance, in the southern United States or in the San Joaquin Valley in California, that there's still some issues there. But I'm convinced that the American innovation will come along and figure out how to get it done and still be the main supplier of those foodstuffs. What I'm going to say is that the indirect impact of COVID is probably going to kill more people than COVID has in continents like Africa. In Africa, from March of 2020 till sometime in the summer, we had recorded there was over 350 million new unemployed African workers. 350 million, that's the size of the United States, unemployed all of a sudden. So people that were making, had a job, making some money, could buy their food resources, now don't have a job. So we're in there with humanitarian aid now. Like I said, our budget is extremely stressed. Executive Director David Beasley of the World Food Program has been diligent going around the world trying to raise additional capital to bring in to make sure that we can feed and meet this crisis. We see it as almost as probably the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. And it's because of the indirect impacts of COVID. When I was in Sudan a week and a half ago, a person came up to me and they were translating for me, but he said, I would rather die of COVID than I would of starvation. And the same goes for my family. I can't imagine, we are starving now. We're living on 300 to 400 calories a day per person, and they're slowly losing weight. And believe me, we're pushing as much food in there as we can, but we can't meet it all. And we got situations in Yemen. We feed 12.5 million people there. We got Somalia, we got Syria, we got Syrian camps in Lebanon right now that we're feeding. So it continues to grow. At the same time, we're running out of capacity, running out of money. And this is where the Food and Agriculture Organization of the past failed miserably in creating resilience and capacity, because these countries, Nigeria, Sudan, all the way across the Sahel and on south, could have been feeding themselves. But instead, they haven't built those systems up. The other issue
is that because we're giving them too much food in the sense that the leaders don't have to put resources towards food production because they're getting it from donations?
Part of it could be that. We continue to encourage leaders, like we were last week in Sudan, is you need to open up your policy and allow innovations to come in. One was allow GMs to come in. I met with farmers large and small, and they said we're using genetics that are 40 years old. We have extreme amounts of fall armyworm. We have now the desert locust, African desert locust, but yet we're not allowed to use pesticides. We're not allowed to use GM crops. That is itself is creating part of the starvation. This is where the French and a lot of the Europeans have been going across to Africa and saying, you don't want to allow GMs in, you don't want to allow the use of pesticides or fertilizer. And this is why Africa remains a food insecure continent. It's unexcusable. It shouldn't have happened, but it's where we're at today. And I'm convinced we're getting the traction now to make the difference. That's one of the things I'm doing in Sudan right now, to take global leaders of different agricultural organizations, people involved in supply chain from the farm gate to value add production, and get involved in Sudan, especially since we signed the Abraham Accords, bringing in that investment activity and making sure we improve food security.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.